New tariffs on steel and aluminium imports to the US kicked in a few hours ago, now doubling to 50%. The struggling US steel industry is applauding this latest broadside from the Trump administration. But other sectors that rely on the metals are warning of price hikes everywhere, from car lots to grocery store shelves, although it's not entirely clear how or when the costs will be passed on to consumers. Meanwhile, the Trump team has asked all countries that trade with the US to submit trade proposals by the end of today. The White House called the letter that went out a friendly reminder that the deadline is coming up. Meanwhile, trade tensions between the US and China are still flaring as Chinese state media is taking some new swipes at President Trump with the help of AI. CNN's Will Ripley explains.
This AI-generated anime is going viral in China, portraying U.S. President Donald Trump as a tariff-wielding superhero. It's one of several recent videos mocking Trump's trade war policies, many of them created with AI.
Your taxi truck, your taxi tire, red was burning in your dumpster fire.
China's English-language broadcaster produced this video, blaming Trump's tariffs for U.S. inflation and global instability. The video echoes Beijing's official stance. Since the U.S. imposition of the unilateral tariff measures, it has not resolved any of its own issues, she says, and has instead severely undermined the international economic and trade order. China's Xinhua news agency produced this AI animation featuring a robot named Tariff, programmed to impose trade restrictions.
I now choose death to end the harm.
Please, don't do this.
Goodbye, Dr. Mallory.
The robot self-destructs rather than obey orders to raise tariffs. AI-generated clips like these, showing Trump and Elon Musk hard at work in factories, have been flooding China's tightly controlled social media platforms for months, all untouched by Beijing's army of online censors. Designed to push China's narrative, the U.S. is making a fool of itself, and more importantly, losing ground to China in the global trade war President Trump started. China's foreign trade has been able to withstand the difficulties, he says, maintaining steady growth and showing strong resilience to maintain competitiveness on the international front. China's Bureau of Statistics put out numbers claiming exports are actually rising despite the trade war, partially due to a surge in orders before the tariffs kicked in. Outside observers often question the accuracy of China's numbers, which are impossible to independently verify. At this Chinese textile plant, the director says the U.S. no longer dominates their strategy. The trade war made me realize the U.S. is just a small part of the global market, he says. We'd rather bring Chinese products to the rest of the world, reasonably priced, high quality, and let more people benefit. China's top diplomat is also firing back, Wang Yi reportedly telling new U.S. Ambassador David Perdue the U.S.-China relationship's at a critical juncture. The Chinese readout of the meeting also says David Perdue stated that President Trump greatly respects President Xi Jinping. Far from tough talk, China claims, ahead of that likely crucial call between Trump and Xi. They sure do have a lot to talk about. The 90-day trade truce they brokered in Geneva is unraveling right now. At stake, rare earth minerals, vital for U.S. tech and defense, which China is still restricting. Washington's latest retaliatory moves include tech sanctions and student visa bans. Both sides are now accusing the other of undermining the agreement, which is putting global markets and supply chains on edge. Will Ripley, CNN, Taipei.
New U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum imports are now in effect. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Tuesday, doubling the tariffs from 25% to 50%. Critics warn this could lead to higher prices on everything from cars and appliances to electrical equipment and even groceries. But the U.S. president insists the action will boost manufacturing jobs. Meanwhile, the U.S. trade representative has told all countries that trade with the United States to submit their best trade proposals by Wednesday.
USTR sent this letter to all of our trading partners just to give them a friendly reminder that the deadline is coming up. And they are in talks. Ambassador Greer, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick are in talks with many of our key trading partners around the globe. As you know, Brian, I know the Wall Street Journal has covered this quite heavily. And they continue to be engaged in those discussions. And this letter was simply to remind these countries that the deadline is approaching and the president expects good deals. And we are on track for that, I will emphasize.
To New York now, and Rana Faruha, CNN global economic analyst. She's also a global business columnist and associate editor with the Financial Times. Good to have you with us.
Great to be here.
So ahead of a much anticipated phone call between President Donald Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, China is mocking Trump, saying he's losing his own trade war with Beijing and portraying the US as increasingly isolated economically after Trump previously criticized China. So where do you see this going, and how might this back and forth impact the outcome of that critical phone call?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there are the facts on the ground about trade, and then there are the psychologies of the leaders of the U.S. and China. And, I would say that in some ways, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping have a few things in common. They're both quite nationalistic. They tend to like things to go their way. These are two powerful leaders that are squaring off, and neither of them can really afford politically to be seen as being weak. Weakness and the perception of political loss is something that's completely unacceptable to Trump. We've seen that again and again. And China is at a moment where it really can't afford to be seen to be kowtowing to Donald Trump. So I think Xi Jinping is in a position where, even if he wasn't naturally inclined to play it tough, I think politically it's, difficult at this moment for China to back down in the face of Trump's tariffs war.
And just weeks away from the deadline for the 90-day pause on tariffs, the White House says that President Trump has sent out letters to major US trading partners demanding their best offers by the end of today, Wednesday, calling this a friendly reminder in an apparent effort to get deals done before that July 8th deadline. What's your response to this method of making trade deals?
Well, I think Trump's strategy has always been to divide and conquer. He looks for who's weak in any given trading bloc, tries to sort of pull weaker nations apart from their natural blocks. I mean, in some ways, you could look at the trade deal that's been cut with the UK and say, well, shouldn't the UK's natural alliance be with Europe post-Brexit? Of course, that's not the case. But I think one of the things that Trump likes to do is to really kind of separate nations out and really try and make them negotiate on their own. I've been a little bit surprised, frankly, that we haven't seen more open alliance making between countries outside the U.S. I'm surprised we haven't seen China and the European Union, for example, coming out with some, shared talking points or shared approaches to Trump. That, to me, would be the way to deal with the U.S. president, but we haven't seen it yet.
And Donald Trump posted on Truth Social Tuesday that, quote, because of tariffs, our economy is booming. As an economist yourself, what do you say to that, particularly after the OECD just slashed its US growth forecast, bringing global expectations down with it?
Yeah, it's really kind of tragic, Rosemary, because, the U.S. had the strongest recovery in the post-COVID world. I mean, we really were the envy of the rest of the world coming out of the pandemic over the last few years. That's been squandered. The U.S. economy has been strong. It has been robust. Jobs numbers are still pretty good, amazing, despite everything. But absolutely, the OECD is saying by the end of 2025 and into 2026, we are going to see growth that's about half of what it was over the last few years. So that's a big blow. And the U.S. is coming in way weaker than many other countries. So it's as though the tables have been turned, really, in this administration.
And Rana, we're also hearing warnings about a crack in the bond market. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon warning of panic when that happens. Is it too late to stop that from happening if the trade war drags on?
Boy, I think if we see high double-digit tariffs, if we see on-again, off-again legal remedies, I think the bond market is going to crack. We've already seen this happening, and it's going to be very difficult for the Fed to lower interest rates at this point, given the tariffs that are coming. We hear them being felt, in Middle America and other parts of the world, and with inflation the way it's looking like it's going to be really, really hard to lower rates. That puts pressure on the U.S. government. It makes debt more expensive at a time when there are fewer foreign buyers for U.S. Treasury bills. The bond market doesn't like any of this, and it doesn't like the uncertainty.
And you mention the debt. I mean, billionaire Elon Musk is publicly breaking with President Trump, calling his big, beautiful bill a disgusting abomination because it will add nearly $4 trillion to the national debt. How damaging could Trump's spending bill be if it gets through the Senate in its current form?